Okay, I just want to end with a few stories. At the beginning, someone asked, we need some hope. And I think you've had hope a little, haven't you? I mean, Hikmat's message to us as someone in a country that has received 1.5 million refugees and still passionate to do more is incredible. Harvey telling us about the migration to the UK is actually revitalising the church rather than just, destroying our resources. It's a complete game changer. But let me tell you a couple of stories that may just encourage you. And I'm going to start a long time ago, back in the last millennia, in the 1990s. My wife and I were living in Albania. We were cross-cultural missionaries working with the International Fellowship of Evangelical Students. Does that mean anything to you? Don't worry if it doesn't. It's university student type stuff. And while we were in Albania, the Kosovan War broke out. And we saw the Albanian people in the north of Albania, which is incredibly poor, just open their homes to Kosovans fleeing the genocide. And the Kosovans were shocked that the north of Albania was as poor as it was. And yet people still opened their homes and shared what little they had with others. It's a powerful, repeating narrative, isn't it? The more you have, the less you share. The less you have, the more you share. Well, they experienced that. And we experienced it too. We were incredibly impressed by the generosity of Albanian Christians, but actually Albanian Muslims and people of no faith. We just saw that. And then when my wife and I moved back to the UK, I took up a role as a pastor not far from here in Harrow. And I used to walk from my house to the church down the road. And one day I heard two gardeners talking to each other. And I recognized the language. So I just poked my head through the hedge and said, "Chkemi, sieni." And the guys jumped out of their skin. They thought they'd seen a ghost because they were Kosovan refugees. And brown people from England don't tend to speak Albanian. And they just thought it was the weirdest thing they'd ever seen. And we got to know each other. One of them was an engineer, the other was a doctor, but because of the way that our systems work, they couldn't use any of their qualifications, so they were doing crazy paving in someone's garden. And I began to find out a little bit more about them, and they had come in quite a large group of families to the UK, and they didn't really fit in. They were Muslim by background, but the mosque was browner than they were, and they weren't welcomed. And so they said, our children are forgetting their mother tongue. And so we dreamt up what we could do, and we ended up opening up our tiny little church to run a Saturday language school for Kosovan refugees. And gradually members of the church got to know people from the Kosovan community, and they could help them with filling in passport forms and being witnesses and stuff. And then one evening we thought, okay, what are you missing? What would really bring joy to your community? They said, well, we never get to hear our music. We never get to read our poetry. Can we hold a party? So Saturday night in an old Brethren assembly hall, there was this huge Kosovan party kicking off. And it was, the room was about a quarter of this size, but there was probably 200 people in it. This was before the days of fire safety, or that's what I'm saying. And the room was so hot with people just dancing and singing. It was fantastic. The windows began to fog up. And so in order to get some air, people used to just come out outside of the church. And I got chatting to a guy there, and he said, look, I just don't understand what's going on here. He said, you Christians were the ones that were trying to kill us. We thought that Christians hated Muslims because that was what the genocide was framed as. If you know anything about missional theology, you might have heard something called the Engel scale. That's how far away someone is from the gospel. If you think that Christians are trying to murder and ethnically cleanse your family, you're about as far down the Engel scale as it's possible to get. Are you with me? If someone had got a gospel tract out or shown them the Jesus film, they'd have just thought, I'm not interested because you guys are trying to murder my family. And so this guy goes, I just don't understand what's going on here. We're having the best time, and the sign on the wall says Jesus is Lord. I don't know what's happening here. This doesn't make sense to me. And therefore, in the cold outside, him sweating and me freezing, we had a conversation about what the gospel was really about his experience of Christianity wasn't the Christianity that I knew anything about. This was a kind of cultural Christianity, about as far away as you can get from Jesus, that they would try to murder people because of their ethnic or religious background. Well, fast forward a few months, and this tiny little church, we're trying to figure out how we welcome more people from our community. We're getting somewhere with the Kosovan community, but we're a very, very monocultural church in a very, very multicultural area. And so what else could we do to reach out to the community? So I did some knocking on doors and visiting people in their homes. There were a lot of Afghan refugees that were in the community, and we found out that, did you know Afghans love Bollywood music? Did you know that? And they love Bollywood films. They basically must be related to me, right? Because they're kind of Indian. They like cricket and they like Bollywood music. This is fantastic. There's some common ground. So I found out that the East African Asian community also liked Bollywood, and there were a lot of those people in Harrow. So we thought, okay, let's throw a Bollywood event. I'm going to invite Afghans, East African Asians in the, from the rest of the community, British people. We'll just invite them all. And I thought, what could be the most evangelistic thing that you could do with Bollywood? So I used this directory. There used to be the Christian directory. Do you remember it? I don't know who produced it. It was this massive book that had like everything Christian in the country in it. Nowadays we call it the internet, but there was a book for it in the olden times. And I'm looking for anything to do with Christianity and Bollywood. Do you know how much things there are to do with Christianity and Bollywood? Do you know how intersectional those two things are? Zero, right? There was zero Christian Bollywood. So I thought, okay, what's the next best thing apart from Christian Bollywood? Well, I found an Asian Christian Elvis impersonator. I'm going, okay, that's just going to have to cut it. That's as close as we've got. I'm going to invite this Elvis Christian Asian Elvis impersonator. And I think just as backup, we're going to also invite the local Bollywood dance band, who are secular, but they could come too. And our whole congregation got involved. It was a very white congregation, but they talked to their Muslim and Hindu neighbours. It wasn't cultural appropriation, but they decided that we would do this in Indian dress. And so 90-year-old grandmothers were dressing up in saris and putus, and friends decided that we could do an Indian vegetarian meal that would work for Muslims and Hindus and Christians and secularists. And then we got advertising in the paper. The paper, a local paper, just says, "Church brings races together." And then a little picture, Elvis, Christian Asian Elvis impersonator. On Sunday mornings, our church would probably have maybe 100 people on the best day. Like when all the kids brought all their mates because they were free sweets and all the relatives were visiting. But for this event, there was 300 people came. And I went out to visit the Elvis impersonator. And he drove up in a Mercedes-Benz with a driver. He was in the back, right? And I went to greet him, and he wouldn't shake my hand because he was so famous. So he was terrible. He was absolutely the worst person ever. But somehow, the Bollywood dance band were great, the DJ was fantastic, and we had an opportunity to talk about the gospel. And so gradually we began to reach into our community. We let people know that there was somewhere safe, where their culture was respected, where we were trying our best to kind of reach out with hospitality. And it all culminated. Let me just tell you one last bit of this story, because I want to encourage you that a tiny church that you've never heard of, that doesn't have lots of resource, can be a space in which the stranger can feel welcomed. We enjoyed the Elvis impersonator events, and we thought, could we do anything more? And then we did a bit of research and found out that Benga music was very popular from East Africa. So we thought we'd have a Benga night. I found a Christian Benga band, and on the Saturday night we'd have Benga music. On the Sunday we'd have Benga worship. So our worship service was taken over with a different style of music. And that was going to happen on the Sunday. And on the Monday, I'm there at the church for mums and toddlers, which is the best evangelistic outreach you can ever do, because the whole community turns up with their baby and you get to dote over the baby and talk about Christian principles of child raising, and it's great. And I'm always turning up for tea and drinking tea with the mums and the dads. It's fantastic. And then this couple come in, and they are Kurdish refugees, I find out. And the husband comes to me and he says, look, I have a problem. My wife, we're Muslims, but my wife wants to become a Christian. And I said, that's a really great problem. It's probably one of the only problems I might actually be able to help with. Let me talk to you. And so his wife didn't speak English, so I spoke English to the husband. The husband translated it to the wife. The wife had a question, translated it to the husband, and then it came back to me. And I was trying the whole, count the cost of discipleship and how hard it will be, and are you ready for it? And I was doing my best to put this person off from becoming a Christian, so it wasn't easy believism, but everything I said, she wanted to go for it. And so I led her in a prayer, and the husband translated it, she prayed it, and we all said amen at the end. And I said, this is great, this is the beginning. Can I visit you? Oh yeah, come to our house. So I visited them 3 times that week. We were working our way through John's Gospel. And on Sunday, they were going to come to Benga worship. And great, that was all good. This is the best week of my church experience. On the Tuesday of that week, our church had a little website which allowed you to put a prayer request in. And my wife would read the prayer requests. And one request came in, I've just moved to the UK from India, and I haven't got anywhere to live. Could someone pray for me? Now, if you know my wife, she has the biggest heart possible. And so she says, well, why doesn't he come and live with us? And I'm like, who the heck is this guy? We don't know anything about him. Can we at least do an interview with him before we say yes? So on the Wednesday, he comes to visit us, and he's there in our lounge. We show him the room, and I said, look, you just need to know we're Christians. I pastor the church down the road. You would be very welcome to come with us to church, but there's no pressure. If you live with us, there's no strings. And he says, oh, good. I've been wanting to meet Christians since I've come to the UK. And I said, why is that? He said, well, in India, my aunt, she died. And then Christians prayed for her, and now she's alive again. And I'm like, no, that didn't happen. What are you talking about? I'm a proper reformed Christian, right? We believe in miracles in biblical times, but now, give me a break. That kind of stuff doesn't happen. Resurrection from the dead, get alive. But then I'm not saying this out loud. I'm just saying this in my head because I think I don't want to destroy this guy's faith. How can I encourage it? And anyway, and then God's speaking to me that this person in my lounge has more faith in God than I do, and he's not even a Christian yet. So I said, oh, well, why don't you come on Sunday? We're having this special service. We're calling it Benga Worship. He says, I'll be there. So I said, oh, that's fantastic. So Benga Worship happens, right? Sunday morning, it's a band from Kenya, and we're singing half in English and half in Kiswahili. And they try to teach us a song. Does anyone here speak Kiswahili? Not yet? Okay, we can work on that. So he's going to teach us a song called Jesus is the Rock. I'm in. He says, okay, you say Jesus is the rock. You say, Jesus ni mamba. I said, okay, that sounds great. And he says, okay, now you say it. So you repeat after me. Jesus ni mamba. Jesus ni mwamba. Yeah. Well, we all said Jesus ni mwamba, which means, I think, Jesus is a snake. And the band is laughing at the church, and we're laughing at the band. We're having a great time. All of the African people that have come for the Sunday, they are dancing, they're ululating, they're having a great time. The rest of us look like Joe Biden at a Pentecostal event, right? We are not moving. There's no rhythm happening. It's just, people think we're having a stroke. It's not good. And anyway, we're still laughing. And in the back row is this Kurdish family of whom the wife has become a Christian that week. The husband is kind of on his journey. And you've got this Hindu guy from India who believes in the resurrection, right? And the Hindu guy goes, you white people really don't know anything about dancing. And I'm going, yeah, I hear you, but I don't understand what's happening in this place. I've never been in the same room as a Muslim, but here I'm sat next to someone, and one of them says they've become a Christian. I can't compute what's going on here. Do you see how the church is supposed to be this kind of supernatural sociology? We're supposed to demonstrate this kingdom that breaks in now, that says in Christ, whatever barriers there were in our society, they are blown up. We recognize and we value all the cultures, but we're never going to cause a hierarchy, because in Christ we are one family. And when Kosovan Muslims see it, and Hindu migrants see it, and Kurdish refugees see it, that's the kingdom breaking in. And it never made the news. Hardly anyone's ever heard that story. But it began to change the climate in our church and in our community. I believe the way we fight all of this toxic xenophobia is for the church to model a different reality. And you don't need to be in charge of a denomination to do that. You can start with your home, with your community, with your neighborhood. We can begin to be this taste of what's to come.